what's up everyone, Dragon here for another edition of the Kaiju Cataclysm. I know it's been a hot minute since we've done one of these, but life intervenes, gets in the way, but there's been no shortage of news in terms of Kaiju movies, specifically for the upcoming Godzilla King of the Monsters. So I figured I would kind of just take this opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about what we already know, what we've learned, what I've discussed before, and also kind of just sum up everything that's come up since the last time we did one of these, which I believe was around when the second trailer dropped. My better half is currently predisposed with other matters at the moment, so I decided to just kind of jump in this one and helm this one myself. Again, not much to say really. The marketing has done a very good job of kind of talking a lot about what I would want to talk about, and quite frankly, even answering a lot of questions. The big push I noticed from this campaign, this marketing campaign, has been essentially to kind of educate the uninitiative, which is basically means they could have very easily played the more fanboy card or even elitist card, meaning that market this movie just to Godzilla fans or Kaiju fans by and large, and leaving kind of the wider audience kind of out in the dust, so to speak, not really understanding what's going on. But one of the things I've been really impressed with this marketing campaign is that they've been focusing not just on Kaiju fan. Believe me, there's a lot of stuff that if you are a Kaiju fan, and we're going to get into this, you know what you're seeing, and you more than likely love what you're seeing, and you get what's going to be coming as a result of it. But there's a lot of people who don't really know anything about the lore, the mythology of the Godzilla franchise in general. So to them, they just see, okay, there's Godzilla, there's a big monster with 3 heads, there's one that looks like, some kind of pterosaur with fire, there's another one that's a big bug. They don't really understand the significance of that is Mothra, that is Rodan, that is King Ghidorah. Whereas to us, we're like, seeing King Ghidorah, for those of you guys who maybe don't know, don't understand, let me put it in perspective. For us, King Ghidorah is like Thanos to the Avengers films. When we saw, granted we knew that King Ghidorah was going to be in it, but when word of King Ghidorah was mentioned, that's kind of like at the end of the first Avengers movie when, that one guy goes up to, the back of the other guy and he turns around and it's revealed to be Thanos, and all the comic book fans are like, oh shit, that's Thanos, we know what's coming, you know what I mean? That's kind of what it is like for us. When we heard King Ghidorah, we're like, okay, this isn't just another classic Toho kaiju. This is one of the big guys, both literally and figuratively, and this is one of Godzilla's arch rivals, quite possibly the definitive arch rival, the most iconic in terms of like his bigger nemesis. Other ones would kind of include, probably after King Ghidorah, I would say perhaps his most iconic foe, and I know some people are going to disagree with me, maybe to be DREAGEN, in the sense that he's fought him more than once and was able to do a great deal of damage to Godzilla, and Godzilla did need some help beating him, and DREAGEN even teamed up with King Ghidorah at one point. Actually in DREAGEN's first appearance. So it's a situation of, these are kind of the more menacing foes for Godzilla. These are not just cannon fodder villains. And Rodan, while having squared off against Godzilla, has more often than not been an ally to Godzilla. They've always kind of had a bit of a tumultuous relationship, but Rodan and Godzilla have always been kind of like a Wolverine-esque type heroes in the show era, where they're badasses. If you're a D&D fan, they're like, would be considered chaotic good, leaning heavy on the chaotic, but still good. But King Ghidorah, with the exception of one film, has always been a villainous character, and he has always been kind of the antithesis to Godzilla. So for us to have King Ghidorah in this movie, it's not just, a familiar monster that we've seen Godzilla throw down before. This is like the monster for Godzilla to throw down. So there is significance in that. And getting back to my original point, before I went on this long tangent, the marketing department has done a very good job of kind of, not, I don't want to say explaining, but kind of instilling this sense of severity with that to, I think, the casual moviegoer, meaning that a lot of these trailers, and especially in the TV spots, have been kind of really depicting the King Ghidorah as like, this is a big deal monster. This is a monster that is essentially going to be responsible for a lot of problems, and now they've already announced that there's 17 and counting other monsters showing up, and then essentially they're all kind of, for the most part, most of them are following King Ghidorah, they all recognize that this entire pantheon of kaiju, or excuse me, titans as they're called in this film, are recognized immediately that King Ghidorah is the boss. That his presence alone can challenge, if not usurp, Godzilla's kind of supremacy. That, for them to essentially fall in line behind Godzilla, Godzilla has to take him out. Whereas any other kaiju, these other ones would probably just automatically just default to Godzilla as, top dog. But when King Ghidorah is involved, they're like, okay, well, you've got to defend the title. It's no longer just a given. It could be anybody else. It'd be like, all right, Godzilla's, he rocks the block basically. He's in charge. King Ghidorah shows up. It's like, I don't know. You better prove it to us because this guy, came to play, came to win. So I feel the marketing campaign has done a good job of kind of instilling this sense of like this threat level that is King Ghidorah, and that's good because again, you want people to kind of go in there and understand that this is not just a bunch of big random monsters just throwing into each other. This is a significant bout. If you're a Godzilla fan, you already know that. And if you're not a Godzilla fan, you might be looking at Godzilla fans on YouTube and whatnot and how they are reacting to seeing King Ghidorah and wondering what the hell the big deal is. And that's basically why. So, King Ghidorah is to the MonsterVerse what Thanos is to the MCU. Just to kind of put things in perspective. So now you understand why, for us, King Ghidorah, big deal. Now, the other thing I've been noticing too is like, they're doing some, by the way, if this chair is squeaking, I apologize. Some of the trailers have done a few bait and switches, and I don't think I'm going to be spoiling anything by kind of pointing them out. But again, if you're a kaiju fan, you probably already know these or spotted these or kind of deduce this for yourself. But if you're not, there's the most recent trailer, the third trailer, has kind of had this moment where, after Serizawa says, 17 of them and counting, and like, they're moving like a pack, they're hunting. They all answer to, an alpha, and they show King Ghidorah rise up. And it's kind of, but they've only really shown you Rodan, Mothra, and that one other kind of new kaiju, the one that looks like the mountain rising up out of the ground. And right off the bat, if you're familiar with this pantheon, you realize that, okay, Mothra would not be following King Ghidorah. Mothra is a benevolent kaiju. She's always been depicted as such. Now, granted, she's had her bad days, and sometimes you piss her off, and she's got to, get the job done. She does it through more chaotic means, but ultimately it's to serve a greater good. Rodan is kind of neutral, but tends to lean a bit more good-ish. He's more of a wild card. He's not really beholden to anyone. He's kind of in it to win it for himself. But if there's a greater threat looming, Rodan tends to side with, the side of good, I guess, for lack of a better term. Not really a good guy, but he's not out to destroy the world, so to speak. But he's not out necessarily to save it unless it's really going to be more to his or her benefit. Because at one point, Rodan, there has been female Rodan. In the first film, there were two, a male and female. And in the Heisei era, Fire Rodan was in fact female. So there's that, but I believe the implication there is that it's all these other titans that are going to be following King Ghidorah, the non-copyrighted ones, the ones they created specifically for this movie, so they wouldn't have to shell out a lot more money to Toho to get the rights to all these other classic Toho kaiju. And I think a lot of these monsters are going to be more cannon fodder. And I think I mentioned this before one of the other either Cataclysm episodes or maybe on a trailer reaction. A lot of these trailer reactions for me are kind of a blur because I literally lose my mind. So I just kind of go into this blank, Godzilla joyous, explosion of enthusiasm. So I don't really, I actually get to go back and watch our reaction sometimes because I don't really remember what I say when some of you guys respond saying, oh, you guys are great, oh, I love your reaction. I literally don't know why, and I have to go back and go, oh, okay, I guess I was kind of funny, or oh, okay, I guess I did kind of act a fool on some of that because it's like, I blank out when I do it. But at one point I think I mentioned that one of the benefit of having, new monsters as opposed to kind of the classic ones is that, some people are going to be like, it's going to suck if like Mothra and Rodan die because, we finally got Mothra and Rodan and they're going to be killed off, which means, Are we going to ever have them again in the franchise? Even though Mothra's whole MO is death and rebirth, and we've had multiple Rodans for the throughout the franchise where you've seen that Rodan is more of a species, and that they lay eggs. There's more, so we could always get Mothra and Rodan again. It might not be these in particular, these individuals, but their race, so to speak, we might see it again. But either way, I think they're going to go much further in the film, where some of these other kaiju, the ones that are kind of more like, are probably going to be depicted as more as like the grunts or the foot soldiers of King Ghidorah. So, when Godzilla or Mothra Rodan kind of lays waste to them, we the audience are going, oh, damn, there goes that copyright. It's like, shit. Oh, I wish we could have had them more, because while they may be cool, we don't necessarily have the same emotional attachment to them because they're not monsters we grew up with. So that's one of the benefits of having original monsters in this film, is that, if Godzilla in first 30 seconds of the fight, rips its head off. Okay, whereas if, Rodan, they pull a Bryan Cranston with Rodan and we see Rodan and then suddenly he's dead like, 15 minutes of the movie, we're going to be like, well, that's a fucking waste because they had Rodan and now he's gone. So, and I think I've made that joke before. It's like, watch, we keep seeing mostly those same shots of Rodan coming out of the volcano, and that's watch, they're probably showing us all of Rodan, and Rodan is going to be the Bryan Cranston, of the new movie. We're like, we got Rodan, and then Rodan's dead. It's like, oh, shit. Which will actually, I'll get to that in a minute because that's something else I want to talk about. Possible deaths in this movie, because I have some fan theories that I think might be more than just theories, but I'll get to that in just a moment. But yeah, so I think that is probably what they mean by that when they say they're all following an alpha. I mean, these trailers are some of the best trailers I've ever seen, and they are cut together very, very well. And I think they are purposely, not overtly so, but in some areas baiting and switching you a little bit, because they want you going in there thinking one thing and being surprised. I think right now they're more or less depicting everyone who's not Godzilla is the bad monster, even though they kind of show those few moments of Mothra reaching with Millie Bobby Brown. But overall, they're not really leaning into like who's to go with. It's all Godzilla, and I think they know that kaiju fans already kind of know how this is going to go, but they want people who have never seen the older film, who don't really know about it, to be pleasantly surprised. So when you realize at the end of the movie there's a slightly Avengers-esque kind of team up, and I say that loosely because technically Toho did this way before the MCU was even a thing, but just for people who don't know, kind of again using the MCU as like an example so they can kind of understand my meaning, that if you at the end of the movie you see maybe Godzilla and Mothra and Rodan kind of teaming up, it will be like, oh wow, so they weren't all going to be just against Godzilla. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, and they teased that even in the second trailer where they were basically saying, which ones are here to protect us, which ones are here to destroy us, so implying that they're not all bad. A bunch of them are falling in line behind King Ghidorah because for the most part they see him as top dog. But some of them are like, no, fuck that guy, basically. And Godzilla is the only one who's really like, not only does he not want to follow King Ghidorah, but he's not scared of King Ghidorah. And certain other kaiju are going to kind of recognize this, okay, well, King Ghidorah rules through fear and terror, where Godzilla is scary because he's tough as hell, but Godzilla almost rules more from a sense of awe, because you kind of want to back Godzilla because he's just so cool and he's so tough and he doesn't back down from anything, that you can't help but respect him. And certain other monsters respond more to like this alpha of like, he invokes pride in others, and you can't help but just kind of look at him and be like, yeah, I want to be like that guy, because here he's big, he's strong, and he's fearless. And even when he goes against a monster bigger than him, King Ghidorah, he's undaunted. He does not falter in the face of adversity, no matter how great. So one rules through just sheer terror, like a tyrant. The other is more or less rules, from a sense of like respect. Like, other monsters will respect him by default just because of who he is, and how he carries himself. So that's that. One of the other, so again, I think I've touched upon this before. Now, the director Michael Dougherty has stated that maybe the Mothra twins might be in the movie. And for those who don't know, that Mothra traditionally had a psychic link with these two little twin fairies. There's two little twin girls that stood about this tall. and they would always like speak in unison. They would kind of basically speak for Mothra. And different iterations, they were a little different. In the earlier films, they were played by a Japanese pop group called the Peanuts, two twin girls, pop singers. And essentially they were literal girls, but they served as like Mothra's envoys, basically. So Mothra was one of the few kaiju that could communicate directly with humanity, and she would do so through these fairies who kind of were psychically linked to her and could, communicate on her behalf, kind of thing. Other iterations, they were implied they were more or less a kind of psychic projection of Mothra, where they probably weren't literal girls, but it was Mothra's way of kind of communicating with us in what we would deem a non-threatening way. So Mothra was this massive insect kaiju, but she chose these tiny little girls, that kind of seem as opposite of her. So, but yeah, they were implied they were less literal beings, and perhaps really just more or less Mothra herself, just kind of communicating in a more non-threatening way. So how they are going to be portrayed, if they are at all, might be different. I don't know if they're going to see a literal twin fairy. They might talk about them in like in hindsight, like maybe once upon a time there was this race of little tiny humanoids, and there were two in particular, or it might be again kind of an astral or mental projection of Mothra, where we get some kind of form of that. But again, it's more of psychic. But I think the main thing is that Millie Bobby Brown is going to take the place of the twins. We've already said she kind of has a bit of a connection with Mothra, and I think she's going to have the psychic link with Mothra. So she's going to kind of be a more realistic take on this idea of someone basically being able to speak for the monsters, the kaiju. So I kind of think that's what they're doing with Millie Bobby Brown. She's going to kind of be an in-between. We're still going to have like some of the psychic, more fantastical elements that are kind of make up Mothra's lore, but it's going to be presented perhaps in a more, again, realistic way, but having it just be a normal girl doing the same thing perhaps as the twins, but her physical presence will seem less fantastical. So I think that's kind of legendary, finding a little bit of a middle ground there, because they might still be afraid that even though people are going to the movie theater and accepting giant monsters, having now psychic little fairy girls might push it still too far, and they don't want to risk that yet because they want the MonsterVerse to keep going. So that's the kind of stuff that might come down the road, but right now they're just still, okay, let's give them enough more, but let's not give them too much where we might scare, again, non-kaiju fans off. So I'm fine with that. It's a nice kind of, way of doing it. And for all we know, Millie Bobby Brown might be a twin. That could be a surprise for the movie, where suddenly there's two Millie Bobby Browns. We don't know. Now, the other thing is I want to start talking a little real quick about are deaths. I believe Dr. Serizawa, played by Ken Watanabe, is going to die in this movie. And I think we've even seen the scene where he dies. There's this moment, we've seen a few of the trailers, where you see him walking up these temple steps with lava pouring down, and he's carrying something, and you see Godzilla lying there, and he puts his hand on Godzilla. If Michael Dougherty is not just a huge Godzilla fan, he's kind of proven already that, yeah, he's not just a guy who casually likes Godzilla. He is a die-hard Godzilla fan, and his favorite film is the original 1954 Godzilla. And in that film, Dr. Serizawa famously and tragically kills himself to essentially take the secrets of this weapon he has created called the Oxygen Destroyer with him. So in destroying this Godzilla, he wants to just destroy any knowledge of how this device came into being, so we don't create another Godzilla, where Godzilla, the atom bomb beget Godzilla, the nuclear era beget Godzilla. Well, this oxygen destroyer is even worse than nuclear weapons, so what monster will come about from the use of this? Like, he didn't want to create something worse than Godzilla, so he said, okay, I will use this weapon to destroy Godzilla, and I will destroy myself along with it. Therefore, there is no trace of it. And Michael Dougherty said the Oxygen Destroyer is in this movie, and I do believe that is what he's probably carrying in his hand as he's walking up to Godzilla. So, some way, somehow, I feel that Dr. Serizawa is going to begrudgingly be forced to deploy the Oxygen Destroyer, and I think he's going to kill himself. I mean, I think the particulars are going to be different in this film than it was in '54, because the nature of his character is different. what his character is, the kind of scientist he is in this film is very different. So I think the particulars of how that all comes about and why are going to differ greatly from the original film. But I think Doherty, being such a fan of the original film, at some point, some way, somehow, Dr. Serizawa, Ken Watanabe, is going to sacrifice his life for a greater good. And in the original film, it was, again, to kill Godzilla. His character loves Godzilla in this film. And I know they're saying we need to set Godzilla free, so I think something happens, I imagine, to trap him or subdue him in some capacity. And I think rather than use it to kill him, in this film, it might be used to help him or free Godzilla. So he, instead of sacrificing himself to kill Godzilla, he is going to sacrifice himself to give Godzilla a chance. So I still think we're going to get the self-sacrifice from Dr. Serizawa. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Which will suck because I love Ken Watanabe, but at the same time, for his character to have an arc like that is a great character journey for a story. So while it would suck to see him go, if he goes into that kind of way, it won't feel like a cop-out like unfortunately it did with Bryan Cranston's character in the first Godzilla film, where you don't really feel his character got to evolve or develop or really conclude anything before they just kind of cut him short. So I think this time around, even if they're going to do something similar, they're going to allow for a full arc with this character, so when he does meet his end, it feels necessary, and we feel as an audience a sense of completion. I'm trying to think what else we're going to think about. Out of any monsters who will die, I do think out of the main ones, Rodan probably will, and I say that because we've seen some shots from what is no doubt the end fight, and in that fight we've seen Ghidorah, we've seen Godzilla, and we've seen Mothra, but Rodan, and again, it just might be shots not showing, but Rodan is absent in a lot of these shots. And there is that one shot we've seen where Rodan and Ghidorah collide in the end, they fight. I do believe that King Ghidorah is going to maybe either kill Rodan or going to bring Rodan under his control, and then like Godzilla might be forced to kill Rodan. But either way, I don't think Rodan is going to make it to the end of the movie. Mothra could and very well die, but that would be kind of on brand for Mothra. She dies a lot, but Mothra has always kind of represented this element of death and rebirth. So even when Mothra dies, there's usually another one that arises to take her place. So even if Mothra does go down in this movie, which if history keeps repeating itself, brace yourselves, folks, she probably is. It will not necessarily be the end of Mothra, so long as Toho allows them to keep licensing out the character. Mothra will more likely return. I guess that's kind of what she does. I'm trying to think of anything else that I really wanted to kind of touch upon. So it's not really a spoiler because a toy got shown a while back, and they've even one of the TV spots they've shown this. So Burning Godzilla, or I think they're calling him Fire Godzilla in this, but is in this movie now. For those who don't know, Burning Godzilla is what is referred to, is what's kind of been nicknamed as the 1995 iteration of Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Destroyer, where his nuclear core he had absorbed so much nuclear energy that now his body was on the verge of like a meltdown. So he had this glow to him. His atomic breath was like had this spiral beam, and it was orange and red, and basically he was like a Super Saiyan Godzilla, but it also meant that he was nearing the end of his life because his body was essentially going to melt down. And we have seen now Godzilla look like that briefly in this film. Again, how he comes about looking that way, I'm sure it's going to differ to some degree, but there is going to be an iteration of the Burning Godzilla in this movie, which most likely be the way that he destroys King Ghidorah, because King Ghidorah is a physically larger, superior, kaiju, so Godzilla is going to essentially have to have his power up, and will make him physically stronger, and that's kind of probably how it's going to go down. Again, could be different. I could be surprised. Maybe King Ghidorah will learn the error of his ways, and but probably not. So that's probably how it's going to go down. Again, these are all fan theories. I don't want to feel like I'm spoiling anything, because I'm not basing this on anything else other than what we've all seen, trailers, and just kind of pulling from my existing knowledge of the Godzilla franchise. And again, knowing that Michael Dougherty is a huge Godzilla fan, I kind of feel that, okay, well, he's going to kind of take, almost make him have a bit of a highlight reel from various Godzilla films, and kind of cherry pick some of the cooler moments and apply that to this film, which is fine, you know. So, but again, I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. I could be surprised by certain, and that's fine too. But it's fun to speculate. Beyond that, that's really it. And again, this film is going to lead pretty much right in, from my understanding, to Godzilla vs. Kong, which has just finished principal photography, so it's all in post-production now. And again, a lot of people wondered, like, okay, well, if Godzilla is going to basically reach this Super Saiyan level form where he's going to be glowing and nuclear and atomic and super powerful, he can take out King Ghidorah and God knows how many other kaiju. What's the threat level than him fighting a big ape, essentially? Because you know, King Kong is not as dangerous as in theory as King Ghidorah. And one of the ways I've kind of speculated, and they've actually kind of brought about some of the measurements, so Kong is in fact going to be smaller than Godzilla. Significant. I think he's going to be just a little over half the size of Godzilla. So this is not going to be a traditional versus movie. I think this film is going to be the versus movie. And the next one is going to be something different, because you're not going to top King Ghidorah with King Kong. I'm sorry, I know King Kong is technically more iconic, unless you're like a die-hard kaiju fan, than for us. I'm sorry, I'd rather watch a movie with King Ghidorah than King Kong. But I get it, King Kong is a film icon. He's been around longer than Godzilla. His legacy is, you know, has been so influential. I get that, but at the end of the day, when you put those two on screen together, it doesn't look as awe-inspiring as Godzilla facing a giant golden three-headed dragon. So I think this is going to be a different kind of movie, which I think is the smart way to go about this. Let this Godzilla King of the Monsters be your classic, just versus, you know, mashup movie where they're just battling it out. I think Kong is going to be more or less a tool of mankind, more in conjunction with mankind, and I think Godzilla is going to be weaker in that film, and I think that's how they're going to play it, because I get the sense that Godzilla is going to, you know, go max power in this movie and give it everything he's got, you know, to beat King Ghidorah. And while successful, I think he's going to be left kind of drained by the end of the movie. So Godzilla is going to be in a weakened state by the time we see him in Godzilla vs. Kong. And there's probably going to be, you know, governments of the world or organizations who are like, okay, great, we got Godzilla take out one threat, but now we need to take out Godzilla because now we know he can become more powerful than King Ghidorah. And look how much damage King Ghidorah did. So if Godzilla gets back to his full power, we may never be able to defeat him. And if he ever decides to turn on us, we're doomed. So right now he's weak. He's down on one knee, you know, he's out of breath, he's not glowing anymore. Now's our chance. We need to take him out, and we need to get another monster who normally probably would not be able to beat him, but in this weakened condition, we might have a chance. And I get the sense that what might be how Kong comes into play, whereas on a good day, Kong is not beating Godzilla. But Godzilla he's down, he's not out, but he's down, he's weakened, he's wounded, he's against the ropes. And meanwhile, Kong, while smaller and weaker, at full strength, might be able to close that gap in strength, whereas normally it would be too much of a divide. But now it's closed up enough where, okay, full-grown Kong, full strength, might be able to just finish off Godzilla in this weakened state. Again, I could be completely wrong about all this. I don't know. The plot to Godzilla vs. Kong has been very secret, but we do know that Godzilla is going to be bigger than Kong, significantly so. So again, I don't think this is going to be just a straight up, you know, brawl fight, because he's just too damn smaller than Godzilla, and we've seen Godzilla fight a bigger monster. So we know that if they just suddenly made Kong able to hold his own on Godzilla despite being that much smaller, just because he's King Kong, I think that'd be a cop-out, and it would kind of be an obvious bias. We're like, okay, we know it doesn't make sense, but because it's King Kong, somehow we got to make him stronger. It's like, I think they're going to be smarter with the character, and also, and this is really comes down to, we've all wondered if the MonsterVerse is going to go past Godzilla vs. Kong, because that's when Legendary's agreement with Toho expires. So barring an extension on that or a new contract, that's it. Legendary can't make any more Godzilla films. However, Toho has kind of jump started their U.S. branch in Hollywood. I think they started in 1953, and this is now basically they can co-produce films in Hollywood, licensing out their characters, which include Godzilla. So why suddenly do that? Why now basically take a stake in Hollywood if you have no plans on, licensing out Godzilla or any of your other property? It would make sense to do that. So, and based on what the some interviews with the CEO of Legends even said that right now it's a case-by-case basis. If these films do well and like they're successful, then there's a good chance that Toho will be like, okay, well, we've got a worldwide box office hit with this Godzilla. And now, as no longer just creative partners, but as executive producers on the film, meaning it's no longer just an American Godzilla film that's been licensed out by Toho. The Monsterverse would be a Toho production as well, meaning this is no longer like this Godzilla and that Godzilla. This Godzilla would be Godzilla. Toho would be just as much of a part of it as Legendary, which while there's been talk of them doing their own cinematic universe, and they might still do that, at the end of the day, that cinematic universe, while kaiju fans like us would absolutely love it and we're just going to eat it up, will not be as big of a hit worldwide with the average audience. And I think Toho understands it, and I think Toho is more focused right now on making Godzilla a global brand. They don't want to have two, again, they still might do this other one, but they want Godzilla to appeal to audiences anywhere in the world. They want Godzilla to mean what Godzilla has meant to them in Japan everywhere, in America, in the UK, in China, various parts of Europe. They want Godzilla to be to everyone what it is to them. And if you have this kind of international franchise, that'll go a long way, where you'll have films that are perhaps produced in Japan that are in Japanese, and American ones, and basically all are in the Monsterverse. And while that's happening, again, they might still do their own smaller scale cinematic universe, which would be fantastic. Or who knows, they might just, while having a big cinematic universe of the Monsterverse, over in Japan, they might produce smaller scale kind of one-off movies, kind of movies that aren't part of a ongoing continuity, but kind of like what the Millennium series was, where each film minus Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Godzilla Tokyo SOS, all those films were kind of standalone movies. They weren't connected to each other, and you could kind of maybe even do that where we'll have like this standard Godzilla in the Monsterverse, and then Toho can kind of on the side produce different Godzilla films that, they try new things, they experiment, they do new things with it. They don't always have to play it as safe, because this isn't the backbone franchise. This is where they can play around, and who knows, if they have certain luck with certain things, those ideas can then be introduced into the larger continuity. Or again, like I said, they could do just two running continuities. Either way, it's more Godzilla, and I have no problem with it. I just want more Godzilla. But yeah, so that's kind of it. The main thing, what it's going to come down to now, is everyone needs to turn up for these two movies. If they do, it stands to reason that Toho will not only just extend their deal with Legendary, but essentially now write a new one in which they now are major players in Tinseltown. They are now making Godzilla movies in Hollywood. It is Toho making these movies with Legendary. And now Godzilla can truly become a global mainstream brand outside of Japan. Because outside of Japan, it's always been more of a niche market, whereas in Japan, it was always kind of more the mainstream. But now we can get a mainstream Godzilla all over the world. People will be talking about Godzilla hopefully maybe in 10, 15 years the way they talk about Marvel characters now. And before some of you guys roll your eyes about that, just saying 25 years ago, the average schmuck on the street was not talking about Captain America or Iron Man or Black Widow or Black Panther. Unless you were really into the comics, the average person didn't know or even care who these people were. Now anyone and everyone is talking about Thanos and, again, Scarlet Witch. These are all characters now that are on the tongue of the average person, because these movies have put them in the mainstream. So if these films do well and they continue to rise in popularity, as well as how lucrative they are, these characters and this genre of film will start to become more mainstream and more popular outside of its native country of Japan, to the point where now, yeah, the average person knows who KAIJU is. The average person maybe would, is talking about that, how they're excited to see Biollante in a movie. Both characters that Michael Dorn has said he would love to have in a movie. And again, if these movies do well, something tells me he'll get his chance. So to see this grow, to see this expand, and just to support Godzilla, this franchise that a lot of us have loved for so long, and now are getting a small taste of what it's like to see him break out of, again, this niche market and kind of enter the mainstream, and now hearing people who normally would not be uttering the words King Ghidorah on there, people are talking about it on YouTube. It's weird when I see people who clearly didn't grow up watching Godzilla films react to these trailers and saying stuff like, "Oh man, King Ghidorah looks cool," or "Did you see Mothra?" That's such a surreal thing for me to experience, because it's like, wow, this has always been like my thing, and when I say I'm kind of speaking for a lot of us, kaiju fans this is always kind of like this weird segregated thing from the mainstream. We love it, but we know it's not part of the normal conversation. So to hear, normal, well-adjusted people saying these kaiju's names and talking about them, and even referring to them as kaiju, even though they're not called kaiju in the movie, because now the word kaiju has become part of the public conversation. It's kind of a surreal thing, and I personally would only want to see that continue and grow and expand. But if these movies come to a grinding halt, it's probably not going to happen. So we're on the edge of history right now, where we could look back on this moment and say, this was the turning point. This is when, after decades of Godzilla appearing to a niche market, at long last he ascends to the ultimate level of popularity and reaches the top of the mainstream, and now the whole world loves Godzilla the way we love him. Like, young people, children from Norway to Dublin or Spain or the Philippines, all of these kids from all over are going to be introduced to this character, like a lot of us were when we were young, and just be so taken with them and fall in love with him and grow up loving him. Whereas once upon a time they might not have access to him, or basically didn't know anybody who watched the films, and therefore really had no formal introduction to the character. So this could be that moment in history where it all changed. Or, it could be a little flash in the pan, and that could be it. It's going to come down to us. It's going to come down to us turning out, on May 31st, 2019 for Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then the following year for Kong, Godzilla vs. Kong. And if those movies do very well, no matter where you're from, when it comes to the entertainment business, money talks. Money is this and that. Money is God. So if Godzilla is making Toho a lot of money with these movies, Toho will more than likely, at the very least, strongly consider continuing that deal. And I think they want to, and I think this conversation is already had between both parties. They're just now waiting and seeing to make sure that it would be a viable financial deal on both parties' part. And as long as it is, I don't think this will be the end of the MonsterVerse Godzilla. But again, that's going to come down to all of us, all of you. So May 31st, show up, take your friends, take your mom, your dad, your little brother, your little sister, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your next door neighbor, some guy who lives down the hall from you, who you've had a few pleasant but casual conversations with. Get as many people into those theaters as you can for this movie. Show this movie as much love as you can, so one day we'll be, years from now, we'll be looking back on what is now this massive cinematic universe, and and loving the fact that we live in a day and age where there is a Godzilla cinematic universe that is on par with something like the MCU, or at least close to it, and that now everybody and anybody knows who Godzilla is, and it's not just some random familiar, oh, he's the big giant lizard thingy, right? No, they'll understand who Godzilla is as a character, just as the way now as average people now know who Captain America is, who Ant-Man is, whereas, you know, years prior, the average person, besides the visual iconography, probably wouldn't know anything more than, you know, oh yeah, Captain America's that guy who dresses in blue and has a shield, right? They don't know much more beyond that. But now, because of the success of these films, people know who these characters are. And that's what I think as Godzilla fans, we all want for Godzilla. We want the world to know who he is as a character. So that's the goal. So, I call upon all of you to make that a reality. So that's gonna do it for this one. Again, some fan theories, some discussion, just throwing around a few ideas in my head. But ultimately, we're all gonna find out what's what come May 31st. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.